Welcome to NightLight Stories. Today's story is The River That Teaches Patience. You find yourself standing at the edge of a river, its surface gleaming with the first light of dawn. The air is cool, damp with mist, and the water moves with a rhythm that is neither hurried nor still. You step closer and listen, and in the steady rush, you feel the whisper of something ancient. The river is not merely a body of water. It is a teacher, a patient guide who has carried stones, sediments, and stories across countless centuries. As you watch the current slide over smooth rocks, you realize that you are being invited into its classroom, a place where geology, myth, and human psychology meet in seamless flow. The river teaches you patience by its very existence. Consider the way it carved the valley before you. Scientists will tell you that a river shapes land not with sudden bursts of power, but with endless, gentle persistence. A single drop of water is nothing, but billions of drops over thousands of years wear away mountains. This process is called erosion. The river carries sand and gravel downstream, grinding stone into soil, shaping meanders and deltas, hollowing canyons that become the spine of landscapes. To stand here is to see the memory of time written in curves and cliffs. You think of the Grand Canyon in the United States, or the Nile in Africa, or the Ganges in India, each a testament to water's patient work, sculpting Earth not in days or decades, but in aeons. Yet the river is more than physics. Across cultures, rivers have always been sacred. To the ancient Egyptians, the Nile was the heartbeat of existence, its floods delivering life-giving silt. To the Hindus, the Ganges is not just water, but a goddess, Ganga, descending from heaven to cleanse sins and guide souls. Among the Native American Lakota, rivers were seen as relatives, living beings whose flow carried wisdom. Patience, they believed, was not the absence of motion, but the kind of motion that knew its destination even when hidden beyond bends. In these myths, the river is not a servant to be used, but a being to be respected. Its patience, a mirror of how humans must endure cycles of drought and flood, joy and sorrow. You lean down, touch the surface, and feel the cold bite of molecules older than yourself. A river is made of water, H2O, yes, but not just any water. Every molecule here has traveled, evaporating into clouds, condensing into rain, trickling into streams, joining the flow. Some of these molecules may have once passed through glaciers, oceans, or even the bodies of ancient animals. You are literally touching history. Scientists estimate that Earth's water is billions of years old, older even in the mountains around you. To realize this is to recognize patience in the most literal sense. The river has been waiting, circulating, cycling, always moving but never rushing toward an end. Patience is embedded in its chemistry too. Water dissolves minerals slowly, feeding ecosystems drop by drop. A fish swims past, its silver scales flashing. It depends on the dissolved oxygen in this current. Oxygen diffused so gradually you can barely measure the process. The trees lining the banks draw nourishment from soil enriched by silt, deposited grain by grain. Without patience, without the river's unhurried cycles, none of this life would be possible. In this way, biology echoes geology. Everything thrives not by sudden abundance, but by gradual, patient balance. And yet, in the human heart, patience is hard. You recall how easily frustration flares when waiting in traffic, waiting for results, waiting for healing. Our brains are wired for immediacy. Neuroscience explains that the prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning, is constantly at odds with the limbic system, which craves quick rewards. This is the so-called delayed discounting phenomenon. The longer you must wait, the less value your brain assigns to the reward. But here, beside the river, you glimpse another truth. Nature does not discount the future. It invests in it. Rivers do not stop because erosion takes millennia. They flow. They trust the process. And in this, they offer you a model that patience is not passive waiting, but active, steady participation in time. As you walk along the bank, you notice how the river bends. It does not travel in straight lines. Obstacles, rocks, even the lay of the land shape its course. Instead of smashing directly against every barrier, the river curves, slides, adapts. Scientists call this meandering, a river's way of redistributing energy, balancing speed and resistance. Over time, meanders grow exaggerated until oxbow lakes are formed, gentle scars of patience, reminders that persistence need not be rigid. Cultures noticed this long before modern hydrology. In Taoist philosophy, the river is the image of Wu Wei, effortless action. The highest good is like water, which benefits all things and does not compete. You feel this truth in your bones. Patience is not forcing your way through obstacles, but finding the path that time opens naturally. A heron lifts from the reeds, wings wide, its slow flight a mirror of the current below. You realize you've been breathing differently, slower, in rhythm with the water. Psychologists call this entrainment, the body unconsciously syncing to external rhythms. Just as a lullaby calms an infant, the steady sound of the river draws your nervous system into calm. Studies in environmental psychology show that natural sounds, flowing water, rustling leaves, reduce cortisol, the stress hormone. Ancient people may not have measured cortisol, but they knew rivers healed. Pilgrimages to sacred rivers were journeys of purification, both body and mind. You are beginning to understand. Patience is not merely an idea, but a physiological state, one the river can induce if you listen long enough. As the sun rises higher, you notice the interplay of light and current. The water sparkles but never holds still long enough to be grasped. Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, once said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." It is true scientifically. The molecules that touch your hand now are different from those that touched it a second ago. Yet Heraclitus meant more. The river is a metaphor for change, and patience is the art of enduring change without resistance. You too are not the same person you were a moment ago. Neurons fire, memories form, cells die and renew. To exist is to flow. Patience, then, is not about waiting for change to end, but about flowing with it, just as the river does. A memory comes to you. A time when you tried to force outcomes too quickly and frustration led to mistakes. In that memory, you see yourself fighting the current, thrashing for control. Here, beside the river, you understand the futility of that. The river does not rush, yet it accomplishes everything. Mountains are ground to sand, valleys carved, forests nourished. Time bows to the patient flow. You begin to ask yourself, what if patience is not weakness, but strength disguised as stillness? The river answers with silence, yet its silence is eloquent. Scientists studying hydrodynamics know that silence in water often means depth. Surface ripples fade when the river grows deep and steady. Cultures turn this into wisdom. In Japanese Zen, silence and still water symbolize the mind that has learned patience. In indigenous Australian Dreamtime stories, rivers are serpents whose slow movements shaped the earth. In each myth, patience is not emptiness, but creative force, the ability to shape reality without haste. You sit on a rock and let time stretch. Minutes feel longer here, perhaps because there is no clock but the current. Neuroscience explains that in nature, without artificial cues, humans perceive time differently. Our sense of waiting softens. Instead of impatience, you feel immersion. This is called flow state, a psychological condition where attention merges with action, where waiting no longer feels like waiting, but like being carried. The river is always in flow, and in sitting with it, you touch that same state of mind. A dragonfly lands nearby, wings shimmering like glass. Its lifespan is brief, just a few months, yet it spends years as a nymph beneath the water before emerging. Patience again. Biologists call this metamorphosis, the hidden preparation before transformation. Cultures turn dragonflies into symbols of change and resilience. You see how everything along the riverbank carries the same lesson. Growth takes time. You close your eyes and imagine the countless generations who stood where you stand, listening to this same current. Ancient farmers waiting for floods, shamans listening for visions, poets finding metaphors, scientists measuring flow rates, all students of the river. The continuity humbles you. Your impatience feels small against such vastness. The river has outlived empires, languages, and wars. It will outlive you too. And yet, for this brief moment, you are part of its story, learning its lesson. When you open your eyes again, the mist has lifted. The river gleams brighter now, and you notice details you missed before. The swirl of eddies, the sparkle of mica and sand, the dart of minnows. Patience, you realize, is not just about waiting for outcomes, but about noticing what unfolds while you wait. To be patient is to be present. To be present is to see beauty that haste would have hidden. The river continues to flow, teaching without words. Its classroom is endless, its wisdom quiet but firm. You feel it pulling you deeper into its story, as though the current is not only water, but narrative, carrying you forward into the lessons yet to come. Rise and follow the river's path downstream, the sound of its current shaping the rhythm of your steps. The morning has stretched into midday, sunlight flashing through leaves, painting the surface of the water with shifting mosaics of gold and silver. The river keeps moving, never lingering, never rushing, and you, drawn deeper into its presence, realize that patience is not a singular lesson, but a spectrum, revealed slowly, like layers of sediment along its banks. The first thing you notice is how the river changes with its terrain. Where the land slopes steeply, the water becomes rapids, frothing white, energetic, crashing over rocks with force. Yet, when the valley widens, the current slows, becoming broad, calm, reflective. This duality is not random. Scientists know it as part of fluvial geomorphology, the way rivers adapt to gradients and obstacles. In high-gradient streams, turbulence dominates, sculpting narrow channels. In flat plains, meandering loops form, weaving across the land like threads. Both fast and slow sections belong to the same river, teaching you that patience is not uniform stillness. Sometimes patience requires still waiting. Other times, it is measured persistence through turbulence. Cultures long ago intuited this truth. Norse mythology spoke of rivers flowing from the wellspring of creation, Ginnungagap, whose icy and fiery waters gave birth to the world. These primordial rivers were fierce and dangerous, but from them, order emerged. In contrast, in Buddhist tradition, rivers often symbolize the path to enlightenment, long, winding, but always moving toward the ocean of liberation. Each tradition carries an echo of science, that patience is not one shape, but many, changing as life demands, yet always moving towards something larger. You pause where the river widens into a pool, glassy and quiet. Looking into it, you see not only your reflection, but the ecosystem hidden below. Fish hover in suspension, insects skim the surface, algae drift with the current. This stillness is not absence of movement, but balance. In ecology, scientists call it dynamic equilibrium. Even when conditions seem unchanging, countless micro-movements sustain life. Energy flows through the food web, oxygen cycles, carbon dissolves and reemerges. You realize that patience, too, can look like stillness while quietly working within. Your thoughts wander to how humans struggle with this. You think of modern culture saturated with immediacy. Notifications buzz, messages demand instant replies. Streaming services deliver entire seasons in a night. To wait feels like deprivation. Yet, neuroscience reveals the opposite. Patience is linked to stronger emotional regulation, reduced stress, and healthier decision making. Delayed gratification, the ability to resist short-term temptation for long-term gain, has been shown in studies to correlate with better academic performance, healthier relationships, even longer life expectancy. The river demonstrates this endlessly. It doesn't rush to the sea, though that is its inevitable destination. Each curve, each pool, each meander is necessary. Nothing is wasted. The journey itself is the lesson. As you continue, the riverbank narrows and you climb a rise where roots of ancient trees grip the soil like gnarled fingers. The trees lean toward the water, their reflections shimmering below. You recall how rivers nourish forests, carrying nutrients from the mountains into plains. Without rivers, many of the world's richest ecosystems, the Amazon, Congo, Mekong, would wither. In myth, trees and rivers often stand together as symbols of patience, the rooted and the flowing, the still and the moving. In Celtic lore, sacred groves grew beside rivers, places where druids listened for wisdom. In native Hawaiian tradition, why, freshwater, was the essence of life itself, tied to identity and land. Every culture seems to agree. Patience is learned at the meeting place of water and root, where growth and flow intertwine. You rest in the shade and your mind drifts toward memory. You recall how rivers have shaped human history. The Tigris and Euphrates cradled Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent where agriculture was born. The Nile's annual floods allowed Egypt to thrive for millennia. The Indus nourished one of the world's earliest civilizations. Each of these societies learned to live with cycles, to plan in season, to wait for floods, to endure droughts. Patience was not optional, it was survival. Archaeologists and historians point out that even technological advances like irrigation and calendars arose from observing rivers and adapting to their rhythms. Human progress itself is a story of patience learned from water. And yet you also recall the dangers of forgetting this lesson. When civilizations pushed rivers too far, diverting, damming, or draining without balance, disaster followed. The Aral Sea, one of the largest lakes in the world, shrank to a fraction of its size due to unsustainable diversion of rivers for irrigation. Dust storms, collapsing fisheries, economic ruin, all consequences of human impatience. The river teaches that to force outcomes too quickly is to risk collapse. Nature's timeline is slower, steadier, wiser. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of wet earth. You notice dragonflies again, now joined by butterflies, each a reminder of transformation. Scientists studying rivers note that they are not only physical corridors, but also biological ones, migration routes for fish, pathways for birds, lifelines connecting ecosystems. Salmon, for example, hatch in freshwater, migrate to the ocean, then return upstream to spawn, often to the very gravel bed where they began. This cycle can span years, even decades, requiring immense patience coded into biology itself. Indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest revered salmon as sacred precisely because of this patient, cyclical return. You feel awe imagining such instinctual endurance, such trust in time. The river narrows again, tumbling into a gorge. You climb carefully along the path, listening to the roar. Here, the water has carved deep channels into rock, revealing layers of stone like pages in a book. Geologists read these layers as history, volcanic eruptions, ancient seas, glacial deposits. Each line took thousands, sometimes millions of years to form. The river is a historian of patience, recording time in mineral script, and you, standing before it, are reminded that your own story is but one thin layer in a far greater continuum. But the gorge also carries myth. In Greek stories, rivers were often boundary keepers. The river Styx separated the living from the dead, a place of passage requiring patience and reverence. In Celtic lore, rivers were thresholds to the otherworld. Even in Christianity, baptism with river water marks a boundary between old life and new. Across cultures, rivers symbolize transition, and patience is the virtue required to cross thresholds. You begin to sense that your walk along this river itself is a threshold, an initiation into a deeper understanding of time. By now, your body feels tired, but not unpleasantly so. The steady pace has tuned you into the rhythm of the river itself. Your breathing slows, your thoughts loosen. Psychologists might call this a meditative state, the parasympathetic nervous system engaged, calming the fight or flight response. The river has guided you here without effort, teaching that patience is not only mental, but physiological, a whole-body state of alignment with time's natural flow. At the end of the gorge, the river spills into a waterfall. You stand before it, mist cooling your skin, the roar filling your ears. Here, patience takes a different form. The waterfall looks sudden, violent even, but in truth, it is the result of countless years of erosion, soft layers worn away beneath harder stone. What appears as an abrupt drop is the patient accumulation of change. Myths often cast waterfalls as sacred thresholds, places of purification. In Japan, monks once trained beneath the falls, letting the water pound their shoulders until mind and body yielded. To endure the waterfall was to practice patience in its fiercest form. You stay until the spray dampens your clothes, then step back, realizing that the lesson continues downstream. The water does not linger here either. It crashes, churns, then flows on, patient as ever, reshaping itself without pause. You realize that patience is not only about waiting calmly, but about recovering, about continuing after turbulence. The river shows resiliency. No matter the fall, it flows on. As you turn to follow once more, you feel that the river is carrying you inward as much as outward. Each bend reveals not only new landscapes, but new facets of patience itself. You are beginning to see that this journey is as much about your own transformation as it is about understanding water. The river has The afternoon light softens as you continue along the river's path, your feet carrying you in quiet rhythm with the current. Shadows stretch long across the water, and you sense that the river is drawing you into deeper lessons. By now, you understand that patience is not a single virtue, but a living pattern woven through geology, biology, myth, and the human soul. Still, the river has more to reveal, and you feel compelled to follow. The water here flows slower, spreading into a wide floodplain. Grasses ripple in the breeze, and reeds bow toward the current. Floodplains, scientists explain, are natural regulators. They absorb excess water during floods, then release it slowly, preventing destruction downstream. They are buffers, guardians of balance. You see in this a profound teaching. Patience is not only waiting, it is buffering, holding what is too much until the right time, releasing only when safe. Without such balance, chaos would follow. Cultures notice this too. In ancient China, the Yellow River was called China's sorrow for its floods, yet it was also revered as a source of fertility. Dynasties rose and fell depending on how well they learned to respect the patience of flood cycles. Walking farther, you notice how the soil is dark and rich. Sediments deposited over centuries have created some of the most fertile land on Earth. The Nile's silt once fed Egypt's empire. The Mississippi's delta nourishes vast farmlands. This process, known as alluvial deposition, is patience embodied. Tiny particles, carried invisibly in the water, gradually accumulate to form landscapes capable of sustaining civilizations. The lesson is clear. Small acts, sustained over time, can transform barrenness into abundance. You recall how in Hinduism, the goddess Ganga was not only purifier of sins, but also nourisher of crops, her patience feeding generations. You pause to watch a farmer working near the riverbank. He moves unhurriedly, trusting in cycles of rain and soil. Farming has always been a dialogue with rivers, requiring patience in planting, waiting, and harvesting. Anthropologists often argue that agriculture itself taught humanity the value of patience. For the first time, people had to wait months for seeds to become food. In many mythologies, this waiting was sacralized through rituals tied to rivers and fertility gods. To sow beside a river was to enter into covenant with time. You see how the same lesson lives on even today. Patience as faith in unseen growth. Further downstream, the river branches into smaller channels, weaving a network like veins in a body. Ecologists call this a braided river, a system that shifts constantly, channels splitting and rejoining, never fixed. Here, you realize that patience also means adaptability. The river does not insist on one course. It divides, rejoins, finds new ways. In human life, too, patience is often misunderstood as stubborn stillness. But the braided river shows another face: patience as flexibility, trust that detours still lead forward. Indigenous peoples of the Andes, living with braided rivers, often told stories of rivers as tricksters, teaching humans to adapt, to never cling too tightly to one plan. You feel the truth of this, that patience is not rigidity, but resilience through change. You notice birds nesting in the reeds, their songs weaving into the river's music. Each species waits with its own rhythm, eggs incubating, chicks fledging, migrations timed to the seasons. Biologists call this phenology, the study of timing in natural events. Rivers anchor these cycles, providing cues for when fish spawn, when insects hatch, when birds travel. All of life along the river embodies patience, each species attuned to rhythms larger than itself. And humans, too, once listened carefully. Our calendars originally tied to river cycles, our festivals aligned with floods and harvests. Somewhere along the way, in the speed of modern life, we began to forget again. But here, surrounded by these rhythms, you remember again. The river carries you into memory, not just of civilizations, but of creation itself. Geologists believe that rivers played a role in the origin of life. Flowing water provided the mixing of minerals and organic molecules, the conditions for chemistry to become biology. Some theories suggest that life's very patience, its slow evolution from simple to complex, was nurtured in riverbeds. Myths mirror this idea. In Mesopotamian lore, humanity was shaped from clay moistened by river water. In Yoruba tradition, rivers were spirits of fertility, mothers of life. In science and story alike, rivers birthed existence itself. Patience, then, is not merely a human virtue, it is a cosmic principle, the very rhythm by which life emerged. You find yourself thinking of your own beginnings, how even your body carries patience in its cells. Every heartbeat, every breath is an act of waiting and release. Cells divide at precise intervals. Neurons strengthen connections only with repeated use. Modern neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the slow reshaping of the brain over time. Just as rivers carve valleys, your experiences carve pathways in your mind. Habits, memories, resilience all require patience to form. You see now how deeply the metaphor runs, your own inner river flowing, shaping, adapting. As evening draws near, the air cools and the river takes on a copper glow. You come to a place where the current slows into wetlands. Frogs croak, dragonflies dart, and the smell of damp earth rises rich and heavy. Wetlands, often dismissed as swamps, are in truth vital ecosystems. They filter water, trap sediments, host biodiversity. Scientists call them Earth's kidneys. Their patience is quiet but profound. They cleanse, they restore, they wait. In many indigenous traditions, wetlands were seen as sacred wombs, places of birth and renewal. To walk here is to walk in a temple of patience, where time feels suspended. You wade briefly into the shallows, feeling mud ooze between your toes. It is uncomfortable at first, sticky and resistant, but then you notice how the mud holds seeds, how life emerges from this seeming stagnation. Patience often feels uncomfortable, like sinking in mud. Yet within that stillness, unseen growth begins. You think of myths where heroes must endure time and darkness, Jonah in the belly of the fish, Osiris entombed, the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree. The river whispers the same truth. Discomfort is not wasted, it is preparation. As twilight gathers, you notice fireflies flickering above the reeds, their glow mirrored in the water. Biologists explain their light as bioluminescence, a chemical patience where molecules store energy and release it in light in precise rhythm. Cultures saw this as magic. Japanese legends tell of fireflies as the souls of warriors, while Native American stories link them to guidance through darkness. Watching them, you realize that patience is not only endurance, but timing, the art of shining when the moment is right. The river continues onward, but for tonight, you stop. You find a place to sit near the bank, the current murmuring beside you. Stars emerge overhead, mirrored in the dark water. The river's voice is softer now, but still insistent. Patience is not passive action. It is active presence, resilience, adaptability, balance, transformation. You feel its teaching settle into you like silt, layer after layer, building something fertile within. Tomorrow, the river will carry you further, deeper into its wisdom. But for now, you rest. The night and the current flowing together into one long, patient silence. Dawn returns, mist lifting from the river's surface as though the night itself is exhaling. You rise, stretch, and step once more into the rhythm of the river's journey. The water glitters in the early light, and you sense that the lessons awaiting you today will reach into subtler depths. Patience has already shown itself in erosion, in floods and sediments, in the quiet timing of ecosystems. But as you continue, you discover that the river also teaches patience through the way it weaves connection between landscapes, between peoples, between the inner and outer worlds. The current here is broad, moving at a steady pace that seems almost unhurried. Along its banks lie villages, some old, some new. You imagine generations who lived by this river, drawing water, fishing, farming, building their homes. Rivers have always been lifelines, and anthropologists often describe them as corridors of civilization. Where rivers flow, culture flourishes. The Indus Valley cities aligned their streets with irrigation canals. Medieval Europe built towns along rivers like the Rhine and Danube. In Africa, the Niger became a spine of commerce and knowledge. Each community required patience, waiting for seasonal floods, building boats and trade routes, negotiating with neighbors. The river demanded long vision, not short gain, and those who learned this endured. You think of stories passed along rivers like currents themselves. In ancient Mesopotamia, tales of Gilgamesh flooded down the Euphrates, speaking of quests and mortality. In West Africa, griots told riverine epics along the Niger, their oral traditions carrying wisdom as steadily as water carries silt. The patience of storytelling mirrors the patience of the river, words carried across generations, reshaping themselves, yet never breaking the flow. You realize you were part of this same chain, listening, remembering, becoming another voice in the river's endless narration. The scientific truth aligns with this. Rivers are networks linking ecosystems across vast distances. Hydrologists call them connectivity systems. Nutrients from mountain soils feeding fish in the ocean, water cycles linking clouds to crops hundreds of miles away. Patience here is interconnection. Nothing isolated, everything dependent on what comes before and after. In your own life, too, you begin to see the river's teaching that patience often means recognizing you are part of a larger whole, that your waiting is woven into a web of other actions and times. Further along, you find yourself beside a great bend in the river, a meander so wide it seems to circle back on itself. Scientists explain that meanders form through feedback loops. Faster currents on the outside bank erode, while slower currents deposit sediments on the inside. Over centuries, the curve deepens until it almost closes into an oxbow lake. You sit and watch, imagining this transformation that will take centuries to complete. The patience here is geological, almost unimaginable in human terms. And yet, cultures knew this intuitively. In Chinese landscape painting, rivers were often painted winding endlessly, symbols of life's long path. In Celtic myth, the winding river mirrored fate, reminding people that detours and curves are not mistakes, but essential parts of the journey. You feel a deep calm as you watch, the curve itself a meditation. A fisherman appears downstream, casting a net into the current. His movements are deliberate, unhurried. He waits, gathers, waits again. Fishing is patience embodied, trusting the unseen, enduring silence until the right moment comes. Neuroscience tells us that such activities activate brain circuits tied to mindfulness, lowering stress and sharpening focus. Myths elevate fishing into spiritual practice. In Japanese Shinto, fishing gods are revered. In Christian scripture, patient fishermen were chosen as disciples. You understand now that patience is not abstract. It is enacted daily in gestures like casting nets, tending fields, waiting beside water. Further along, the river flows into a canyon, sheer walls rising around you. The sound echoes, magnified, and you feel small beneath the weight of stone. Geologists read these cliffs as records of deep time, sedimentary layers stacked like chapters. Each stratum tells of seas that rose and fell, forests that flourished and vanished, climates that shifted. To stand here is to touch patience on the scale of Earth itself. Cultures often called such places sacred. The Hopi in North America regard canyon rivers as places where spirits dwell, thresholds to deeper wisdom. You feel this too, that patience is not just endurance, but reverence for the vastness that dwarfs you. At midday, you rest, gazing into the currents. You notice tiny whirlpools spiraling, forming and dissolving endlessly. Fluid dynamics explains these vortices as turbulence resolving itself, energy seeking balance. But in them, you see something more. Patience as acceptance of impermanence. The whirlpool does not cling, yet forms, spins, vanishes, replaced by another. In Buddhism, this is impermanence itself, anicca, the recognition that all things arise and pass away. Patience is not resisting this truth, but living with it peacefully as the river does. Walking again, you come upon carvings in rock, a remnant of ancient people who marked the river's presence, petroglyphs of animals, spirals, suns. Archaeologists debate their meanings, but many believe they recorded seasonal cycles, water levels, migrations. These carvings are themselves acts of patience, messages left for future generations, trusting that the river would carry their meaning forward. You realize how human beings have always looked to rivers not just for survival, but for continuity. Patience is leaving a mark that may not bloom until long after you are gone. Later, the river broadens into a delta, splitting into many channels that braid toward the horizon. Deltas are places of abundance, but also of constant change. As sediments shift, channels reroute. Here, patience is creative chaos, a fertile distorter that builds new land as it erases old. Myth often placed creation itself in watery deltas. In Egyptian belief, the Nile Delta was where gods created the first mound of earth. In Hindu cosmology, cosmic waters birth the lotus of creation. Science confirms the symbolism. Deltas are cradles of biodiversity, feeding countless species. To stand in a delta is to see patience as genesis, life emerging not from control, but from surrender to flow. The evening comes slowly, gilding the waters with amber. Villagers gather on the banks, children laughing, elders speaking in quiet tones. You feel the community's patience, the way their lives are measured by the river's rhythm. Fires are lit, smoke rising into twilight. You sit with them, sharing silence, realizing that patience is not always solitary. It is also communal, waiting together, enduring together, flowing together. As night falls, you walk back to the water's edge. The stars shimmer above, mirrored below, as though the river carries the cosmos within it. You recall myths that saw rivers as celestial, like the Milky Way in Greek legend, or the sky rivers of Australian Dreamtime. Scientists, too, describe rivers of stars in galaxies, currents of gravity shaping constellations. Everywhere from earth to sky, the same pattern repeats. Patience as flow, enduring, connecting, transforming. The river whispers again, its voice constant, yet ever new. You sense that tomorrow's journey will carry you even further inward, toward patience not only in landscapes and histories, but in the very core of human existence. For now, you let the sound guide you into rest, the current flowing on, steady, eternal. The morning greets you with a hush of pale light, the river stirring like a great creature awakening. By now, you have followed it through valleys, plains, wetlands, and canyons. You have seen how it teaches patience through erosion, through cycles, through floods and silences. Yet today, as you walk beside it once more, you sense the lesson shifting inward. The river begins to speak not only of landscapes and civilizations, but of the hidden river within you, the currents of the body, the tides of the mind, the flow of the soul. You begin with breath. Listening closely, you notice how your inhalation and exhalation fall naturally into rhythm with the water's pulse. Biologists remind us that every breath is tethered to rivers. Freshwater ecosystems provide the balance for oxygen-producing plants. Wetlands regulate carbon cycles. Rivers carry nutrients to oceans, where phytoplankton, invisible yet abundant, generate much of the air you breathe. Each lungful you draw is connected to this flow. Patience lives here too, in the countless microseconds your lungs expand and contract, in the cellular patience of red blood cells carrying oxygen faithfully without complaint. Cultures long ago saw this link. In Vedic tradition, rivers were likened to prana, the breath of life flowing through the body. In Chinese medicine, meridians were understood as inner rivers carrying qi, energy that must remain balanced. The patience of the river is mirrored inside you. Your heart beats steadily, unceasingly, and your blood circulates in currents that rarely falter. Without this patient flow, existence ceases. To walk with the river is to be reminded that you too are water in motion, 60% of your body composed of it, shaped by it. As you reflect, you come to a still pond beside the main current, formed where the river bends. Its surface is mirror-like, broken only by insects dancing across it. Gazing into the reflection, you sense another form of patience, self-awareness. Neuroscience explains that patience is tied to executive control in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that allows you to pause before reacting. Meditation studies reveal how focusing on breath and silence strengthens these circuits, increasing your ability to wait, endure, and forgive. The pond is your mind when calm, able to reflect clearly, not distorted by turbulence. In Zen practice, such still water is the image of enlightenment, patient clarity. You rise again, following the flow where it gathers speed. Rapids churn ahead, water foaming white over boulders. You watch as the current crashes, collides, and yet finds a way through every obstacle. Here, patience reveals its fierce side. It is not passive, it is perseverance. Physicists studying turbulent flow note that chaos and rapids are still governed by laws. Energy dissipating, vortices forming patterns. To the eye, it looks wild, but within the wildness, there is order. Life mirrors this. In times of turmoil, patience is not about waiting for calm, but trusting that hidden order exists beneath the chaos. Cultures turned rapids into metaphors of trial. Norse myths spoke of rivers of swords that tested heroes. In African tales, spirits lurked in dangerous currents, demanding courage and endurance. The river reminds you that patience is sometimes a trial by fire or by water, teaching strength through turbulence. As the rapids subside, you find yourself in a valley where the river nourishes fields of grain. Golden stalks ripple in the breeze, and farmers work patiently with the soil. Here, you recall the science of seasons, axial tilt, orbital cycles, rainfall patterns, all requiring patience beyond human control. To harvest is to accept that some forces cannot be hurried. Patience here is humility, the recognition that you are dependent on rhythms larger than yourself. Myth reinforces this. Demeter, the Greek goddess of grain, withheld harvest when grieving, teaching humanity that patience is demanded even by gods. In West African tradition, river spirits bless or withhold fertility, reminding communities to wait with reverence. You sit with a farmer, sharing bread. His hands are rough, his manner calm. He speaks of planting in spring, wading through storms, trusting the river to rise and fall. His life is patience embodied, and you see how modern haste often obscures this wisdom. Studies in psychology confirm it. People who practice patience report higher well-being, stronger resilience, deeper satisfaction. Just as fields cannot grow overnight, fulfillment cannot be rushed. The farmer smiles knowingly. The river has taught him what you are only beginning to grasp. Continuing onward, you notice how tributaries join from hillsides, small streams merging into the greater flow. Hydrologists speak of catchment basins, vast networks where every raindrop eventually finds its way to the main channel. This merging is slow, inevitable, patient. In myth, tributaries often symbolize relationships, smaller lives feeding into a greater destiny. In Native American lore, rivers meeting were places of union, of treaties and marriages. Patience here is relational, the willingness to wait for a convergence, to trust that paths will cross when the time is right. The afternoon sun grows heavy, and you rest in the shade of a willow tree leaning into the water. Willows themselves are symbols of patience, flexible, bending rather than breaking, thriving near rivers. Science explains that their roots stabilize banks, preventing erosion, holding ground across decades. Myths portray them as wise and sorrowful, trees of endurance. You sense that patience is not only about time, but about posture, bending, not resisting, trusting the ground even as the current pulls. As evening approaches, the river widens into calm expanses that glow copper under the sinking sun. You see reflections of migrating birds overhead, V-shaped flocks heading toward distant places. Their patience is seasonal, measured in thousands of miles flown with instinctive trust. Biologists call this migratory navigation, guided by stars, Earth magnetic fields, and memory passed across generations. You realize that patience is often generational, carried not by one life alone, but through lineage. Myths echo this. In Polynesian traditions, voyages across the ocean followed star paths taught by ancestors. Patience is trust in guidance older than yourself. The river's voice grows soft in twilight, its current steady and sure. You walk until the stars bloom again, mirrored in the dark water. Tonight you feel the river inside you as much as beside you, its patience beating with your pulse, its flow moving with your thoughts. You understand that tomorrow's journey will carry you toward the end of this pilgrimage, where the river meets the sea and where patience reveals its ultimate lesson. For now, you let the night enfold you, the river's song steady in your dreams. Dawn arrives with a hush of silver mist clinging to the surface of the water. You rise slowly, aware that this is the final stretch of your journey with the river. Its course has taken you across mountains, plains, valleys, and canyons, through rapids and wetlands, alongside villages and fields. You have seen how patience unfolds in geology, in biology, in cultures and myths. Yet one lesson remains, the river's last gift, revealed only as it nears its destiny. The air is different here. A salty tang begins to drift in on the wind, subtle at first, then unmistakable. You know what this means. The sea is near. The river has carried you faithfully, and now its long journey is approaching an end. But it is not a conclusion, it is a transformation. The patience of the river is most clearly revealed at its mouth, where fresh water meets salt, where endings and beginnings become indistinguishable. You walk with it as the banks grow wide, marshes spreading outward, reeds whispering in the breeze. This is an estuary, one of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. Scientists describe it as a nursery for life, where countless fish and birds depend on the blending of fresh and salt waters. It is a place of transition, of slow mixing, of patience embodied in ecology itself. Nothing here is rushed. Tides ebb and flow, salinity gradients shift gradually, organisms adapt delicately. The estuary teaches that true patience is the ability to embrace change, not fighting it, not clinging to what was, but letting boundaries dissolve. Cultural myths reflect this wisdom. In Celtic lore, rivers were seen as thresholds, liminal spaces where one could cross from the ordinary world into the other world. In Japanese Shinto belief, river mouths were sacred, places where earthly and divine waters mingled. Patience in these traditions is not merely waiting, it is surrendering to transformation, allowing yourself to become more than you were. You watch as the river slows, dispersing into braided channels. Its roar has quieted into a low, unhurried murmur, as though it has accepted its fate with grace. Scientists studying deltas note that sediment carried for thousands of miles finally settles here, building fertile land that sustains civilizations. What looks like an ending is in truth a gift, nourishing new beginnings. Patience here is legacy, the willingness to give without demanding return, to flow on even when your journey is complete. You pause to kneel by the water's edge, cupping the cool liquid in your hands. You think of how every drop has traveled through mountains, forests, fields, and skies to reach this moment. Hydrologists remind us that a molecule of water can cycle through rivers, oceans, and clouds for millions of years, never lost, only transformed. In that infinite cycle lies the deepest patience of all, the knowledge that nothing is wasted, that every end folds gently into another beginning. The sun climbs higher, and you begin to hear the surf beyond, a low thunder, steady and vast. The river quickens slightly, as though eager to embrace its union. When at last you stand where it pours into the sea, you are struck silent. Before you stretch an endless horizon, the river's current vanishing into waves that roll from beyond sight. You realize then that the river's greatest lesson is humility. No matter how long its journey, how many lands it carved, how many lives it sustained, it does not resist surrender. It pours itself freely into the sea, patient enough to accept dissolution, wise enough to know it will rise again as rain. Ancient myths spoke of this merging as a metaphor for the soul's return to the eternal ocean. In Hindu tradition, the Ganges is said to flow from the heavens, and to enter it is to rejoin the cosmic ocean. In Sufi poetry, rivers are likened to lovers yearning for union with the beloved, dissolving themselves completely in devotion. Here, patience is ultimate trust, the certainty that what is lost will be found again in another form. Standing at the edge, you close your eyes and let the lesson seep into you. Patience is not merely waiting. It is persistence through mountains, adaptability through rapids, humility in valleys, endurance in floods, surrender at the sea. It is the rhythm of life itself, unfolding in cycles far larger than your own. Science and myth alike point to this truth. The river teaches because it embodies what we struggle to practice. To be patient is to be like water, gentle yet unyielding, slow yet unstoppable, yielding yet victorious. As gulls wheel overhead and waves lap at your feet, you feel a quiet resolve. The river's journey has ended, but its story continues through you. You carry its patience now, in your breath, in your choices, in your willingness to trust the long path ahead. The river has taught you not to rush, not to cling, but to flow. And as you turn away, ready to walk into the next chapter of your life, you hear the river's voice one last time, not in words, but in the timeless sound of water joining water. A reminder that patience is never truly finished. It is the current beneath everything, waiting always to guide you home. The river has carried you far, through its first trickles in the mountain, across valleys and plains, through wetlands and canyons, past villages and farms, and finally into the embrace of the sea. Along the way, you discovered that patience is not a single act of waiting, but a way of being woven into every level of existence. To walk with the river was to walk with time itself, and in its currents, you found reflections of your own life, your own struggles, your own capacity to endure. Science tells us that rivers shape the earth by wearing stone into soil, soil into valleys, valleys into fertile plains. That process takes thousands, even millions of years. Yet the river never stops. And that geological patience lies a truth you can carry. Even the hardest obstacles in your life will soften if you allow steady effort to work its quiet power. The river does not demand results overnight, nor should you. Biology shows us how rivers sustain life. They are the veins of the planet, circulating water and nutrients, feeding forests, animals, and civilizations. Every cell in your body echoes this rhythm, patient, persistent, giving without haste. In remembering this, you see that patience is not passive. It is active generosity, the continuous flow of energy and care that makes growth possible. Cultures across the world wrapped these truths in myth. To the Greeks, rivers were gods who taught reverence. To the Hindus, they were sacred mothers whose waters washed away fear. To native peoples, they were bridges between the physical and the spiritual. Each culture understood that rivers are not only physical realities, but moral teachers. Patience in these traditions is not weakness, it is sacred discipline, the art of aligning your pace with the universe itself. Psychology and neuroscience confirm what the river whispers. Patience is the fruit of self-control, rooted in the brain's ability to pause and choose. It is strengthened by practice, like a muscle, and rewarded with resilience, peace, and deeper fulfillment. Studies show that patient people experience lower stress, stronger relationships, and greater success in the long term. The river, by its steady example, was training your mind as much as your spirit. At the rapids, you learn that patience is perseverance, not abandoning the path when chaos rises, but trusting in hidden order. At the farmlands, you learn that patience is humility, waiting for harvest, accepting that forces greater than yourself govern the seasons. At the estuary, you learn that patience is surrender, allowing boundaries to blur, trusting transformation. At the sea, you learn that patience is legacy, giving yourself to something larger, confident that what you release will return in another form. You realize now that patience is not only about time, it is about posture, how you hold yourself in the current of life. Do you thrash against it, exhausting yourself? Or do you float, trusting the direction while continuing to steer with gentle effort? The river has shown you that the most powerful way is neither resistance nor passivity, but flow. Moving forward steadily, bending without breaking, enduring without losing your form. Standing at the mouth of the river, you see your own life mirrored in its arc. You too began in hidden springs, childhood, small and unassuming. You gathered strength from tributaries, family, teachers, experiences. You rushed through rapids, moments of trial and change. You meandered through valleys, seasons of reflection and waiting. And one day, you too will reach the great sea, where your individual current dissolves into something infinite. To live patiently is to live in harmony with this truth, to embrace each stage without clinging or rushing. The river's teaching is simple but profound. Time will carry you forward whether you fight it or not. Patience is choosing to flow with it, to find meaning in the journey rather than in the finish. This is why cultures prayed by rivers, why poets wrote of them, why scientists still marvel at them. They are the perfect metaphor for the art of being human, slowly changing, deeply connected, endlessly flowing. So now, as you step away from the water, you carry its wisdom within you. When life feels stuck, remember the river's persistence. When chaos surrounds you, remember the rapids' hidden order. When waiting feels unbearable, remember the fields that bloom only in their season. When change frightens you, remember the estuary's gentle blending. And when you fear endings, remember the river's union with the sea, that what seems like dissolution is only transformation. The river has taught you patience not as a burden, but as a strength, not as delay, but as alignment, not as passivity, but as flow. And though this story ends here, the current continues within you and around you, reminding you that patience is not waiting for life to happen. It is living fully, calmly, and wisely in every moment of the journey.